Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of my analysis of Alex Karp's newest interview. He's the CEO and founder of Palantir. I just did part 1. I'll leave that in the description where you can get my macro level thoughts. In that part, I specifically discussed the question around how Palantir will be able to adapt to a new changing world, especially when that world has a lot of problems, and what the product will be able to adapt to. In this interview, or in this excerpt of the interview, we're specifically going over the question, which I thought was a great question, over how do you productize Foundry, which is their commercial flagship software. How do you actually get that software to scale to hundreds and thousands of businesses, given right now it takes a long time to just get one business to adopt it? Really interesting question, really interesting analysis Karp gave in terms of how he thinks about the competition as well. So let's get into it, and I'll give my thoughts on the back end.
On your commercial business, I'm going to take a shot at your competitors for a minute. Or your would-be competitors. Some of them have a lot of nice products. It strikes me as the non-technologist, their products are narrower than yours, maybe more easily digestible, certainly more easily saleable. How do you think about, the Snowflakes of the world, the Databricks of the world, and that product suite, as it were, compared to yours?
So he's explicitly asking him that, look, Snowflake, Databricks, these are major competitors to some extent. And they offer services that are easily scalable. They can sell them. They have a sales process. They understand how to get that process from A to B. Palantir is an outlier. They're an outside box, right? This is the reason why Warren Buffett invested in Snowflake and not Palantir. They're a different organization that is a different sales cycle that potentially for shareholders will have a massively different upside if we are right around how they are trying to execute on this vision, which is going to be the exciting part over the next 5 years. And so this is a question of like, how do you compare with those guys? How is your product going to scale with them? And it's going to be an interesting response.
Well, that's both a shot at them and a could be a legitimate, critical, interesting question about Palantir. Our products are deeper than any other products on the market. Have an institutional veracity that's differentiated. Are doing things that are arguably more important. I don't think that's really subject to debate.
So real quick, so he explicitly says our products are better, right? Not just our products are better, our products are so differentiated and they're solving an actual problem that exists that they're deeper. Deeper is the key word there. These are problems that organizations don't really understand that they have, but that are objective problems. And the products that we're selling are actually resolving those problems. So he's sort of saying, like, Snowflake's, Databricks, whatever, they're doing stuff with data, but they're not doing what we're doing with data. And that is our competitive advantage. That is the ability of going from 0 to 1, right? Being a monopolistic company that truly doesn't have any competition.
I think what is a legitimate question is if a product is future-oriented and requires a depth of understanding of the product, and or it doesn't inherently map to selling a wrench to a pre-existing technical org, will you capture the full value of those products? So I think you can ask the critical question of various companies. You mentioned too, there are many. Are the products actually thick enough to be valuable? You could ask the question of Palantir, is it thin enough to be fully monetized? And I think
that's another really good comparison real quick. So he's saying for our competitors, you can ask the question of, is it thick enough to be valuable? Does it offer a variety of services that are meaningful enough? Does it go deep enough for the product to actually have like any true value to the point where it's a, multi-$100 billion company? And then for Palantir, are they thin enough to monetize? What the dichotomy here is, thick enough to be valuable means you're going deep and you actually have value that you're providing to an organization. Thin enough to be monetized means you have parts of the product that can scale, right? So, let's say Microsoft, right? Microsoft sells Microsoft Office 360. So that's a suite of products. You got Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all that stuff, right? It's a thick product, massive value proposition, right? And you can buy it. But it's also very thin enough, because if I don't want Excel, I can just get Word, or, I don't have to get a subscription for, the next 10 years. I can just get a 1-year subscription and see if I like it out. It's available on the Mac. It's available on the Windows, right? Like there's so many different thin parts of it that productize the product itself that allow it to be scalable and sellable. And Palantir has that problem, right? They have to literally send an engineer for 6 months to integrate the product into your organization, because that's how complex of a problem it is. So there's a dichotomy between they're thick and they're valuable, but they're not necessarily thin and monetizable. And what Karp's about to talk about is bridging that gap at the end of the day.
think both questions are legitimate. What I would say is our view at Palantir is we're very differentiated in building these products before they exist. And on the thick part, we are without competition. So then there's a question of are we able to supply parts of our product or various products, for example, products that we're building now, products that we have in Foundry, to an enterprise that may in fact prefer something that fits into their architecture that is thinner. That gets into a very legitimate question, which is, okay, forget now. It's like, is Palantir building the product of the future, but willing to supply into the current environment by providing products that are more digestible into an organization that maybe it wants to go their own way and wants to buy a certain product for a certain thing, but does not want to buy all of Foundry. By the way, and so the answer in the near term has been yes, but in the future, we are going to continue to focus very much on what you're calling kind of thick, future-oriented products because they're differentiated. But then as the parts of this product become less differentiated and more, for lack of a better word, commodity, like there's 8 companies that supply them, figuring out ways to decouple the product and sell these things in a modular way, partly because there's an assumption which is just not true that is very intuitive, that if you have a full stack product, that the sums of the product are less valuable than if they were taken apart, i.e. that each part of that product is inferior to a product that's just that product. But it's actually not true at all. It's actually the opposite. And part of what we will be doing over the next couple of years is both continuing to build things that are not understood, sell them to deal with the macro conditions that you have outlined that I agree, but also democratizing parts of our product so that people who want a different version of the product can also buy it. We're not super ideological there, as long as our core mission is to continue to be entrepreneurial outsiders in the product realm, which is where, again, we would like to continue to stay in a world where we're not competitive.
Okay, so really, really important things there. So one of the things that Karp is really sort of honing in on is that, look, they've got a thick product that has no competition. And because they have a thick product that has no competition, he's really not worried about the overall value proposition of the product in and of itself, which is a really good thing to hear as someone who's invested in the company, because the CEO genuinely believes there's really no one that's messing with us on the product side. Like, we've got something that is misunderstood. And because it's misunderstood, it's so much better because the nature of it being misunderstood means that no one can compete with it because no one knows what you're doing. That's the whole philosophy behind 0 to 1, right? That's sort of the thesis of Palantir, which is why they believe they've got a thick product. But they're not ideological about thinning out the product and scaling it over time. So the point he mentions is that, look, eventually our product will become a commodity because certain parts of it will be easily sellable, right? So like right now they offer this really full stack data analytics integration platform, but there's certain parts of it that are eventually going to be copied by the market. That's just the nature of how capitalism operates. Whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, whether it's any other small startup, there are other companies in the data analytics space, they're going to be able to find parts of the product that they can sell. And then there's not going to be a competitive advantage between you and the other person, the other competitor. So that's why he's saying over the next couple of years, we're going to have to be able to figure out how do we take certain parts of Foundry and give that to like 10,000 small retailers. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. And those small retailers can use like a payments, cash flow, integrated data analytics platform to manage the $10,000 of sales they do a month, right? Palantir would never go after that customer because that customer is just not big enough for them. And their product is so different and their product is so unique and thick in terms of its value proposition that they're not looking to sell to that type of client. They're looking for a different type of client. Well, over the next, 5-10 years, they're going to have to be able to realize that in order for us to scale, there's going to have to be parts of Foundry that are so phenomenally powerful for that small retailer that we will be able to offer it to that retailer and not have to be ideological about having them integrate the entire Foundry ecosystem into their small business. And I think it's a good thing that he says that they're trying to figure out different ways to commoditize parts of the product eventually in order to be able to sell. He also brings up this point that some people have an assumption that if you take away a part of a product, if there's 5 parts, you take away one part, that one part will never be as good as those 5 parts. And his argument is like, well, that's not true if we make the product itself amazing and then the one part out of the 5 parts also amazing. And if we're able to do that and we're able to then package it in a way that is scalable, then we have another market opportunity to be able to unveil that product. The other thing he says here is that we're working on new products, right? And he says over the next couple of years that we're working on a lot of different products. So obviously they've got them, they have Foundry, and then Apollo, he referenced it a little bit later in the interview, which is this like revolutionary way for your enterprise to actually manage all of the updates and software packages that you have to ship out to different clients. It's like the operating system of the operating system. It's a really unique way to sort of think about it. I did a video on that. I'll put it in the description. It is a little bit complicated to understand, but it's unique. And so his argument here is like, look, we have a differentiated approach at the end of the day towards product. And because we have a thick product value proposition, Snowflake, Databricks, those guys aren't really going to mess with us. But over time, we know that there's going to have to be parts of the product that are going to be sellable. And once those parts of the products are recognizable, that there is an easy market for them to be sold to, that's when we're going to figure out how to commoditize Foundry and like break up certain parts of it. Now, the real key takeaway here is that it's important to recognize, or it's important for me, at least as a shareholder, to understand that they're already thinking of this problem. Right? They're already thinking of this problem from two perspectives. How do we get thinner and monetizable from a business perspective, but maintain the thickness of the value we're providing? And that's kind of what he says at the end. It's like, how do we continue to make sure we're entrepreneurial, that we think outside of the box, that every time we introduce a new product, even if it's super thin to monetize, and even if it's like easily replicatable by other parts of the market, how do we have such a unique approach in terms of just building the nature of that product that other people don't want to use different forms of competitors? And the macro level cultural argument he's making is that most companies fail over time because they end up just building these mass products that they can sell to everyone, and there's no differentiated approach because they're so focused on sales and numbers. And as long as they keep this entrepreneurial think outside of the box, how can we do things different? How can we like understand the world from a different perspective? How can we continuously build things that people don't know should exist or can exist? And eventually we'll figure out the monetization part at the end because it'll get thinner over time. We'll be able to sell it over time. We'll be able to develop relationships over time, and we'll be able to have a market opportunity for the product. So I thought this was a really good question. I thought this was a really good answer. And I ultimately thought that he had a really good understanding of where the market is going and how Palantir has to be able to adapt to that market. The big takeaway from this part of the interview is that he thinks there is no competition, and they've said this before, but it's just nice to hear it again, that like he really does think their product has no competition. So when Snowflake is going for the same dollars that Palantir is going after, they believe that they will be able to get those dollars. Now, will that happen? I don't know. We'll see over the next couple quarters what they're able to do. But if they are able to do that and do that 30% growth year over year, and potentially 40, 50%, right? Because that's where you get to the exponential growth level. Once this thing really starts ramping up, there will be a chance for there to be major upside for this company and hopefully for the stock as well. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you guys think about Alex Karp's thoughts on thick value proposition, thin ability to monetize, and ultimately what it means for the product to scale long term. Looking forward to reading the comments. My name is Mitt. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.